So hello and welcome to the video, and welcome to Doha Airport's new orchard feature zone, perhaps. No intro to camera for this video, as I thought it would follow on from my inbound flight on Qatar's 787 product from Dublin. But this transit of Doha and the flight on to Phuket was quite a different experience to what I've shown so far, and so I've decided it deserves its own video. The orchard is certainly very impactful, and it's quite an impressive space, surrounded by just about every luxury branded boutique you can think of. It is astonishing to me that there's a business case to have so many premium stores in one place. The orchard is certainly impactful, but it's also wildly disorienting. I thought the signage was really poor, and I did find it quite hard to work out where I needed to go. There will be lounges up this end of the terminal, quite impressive lounges too, according to Headfor Points, but they weren't open when I visited, so I needed to take a train to get up to the other end of the terminal where the facilities are currently located. I finally made it to the scary teddy bear, which is the focal point, and I know where I am when I'm close to the bear. So if you'd like to see what Qatar's third string business class product is like, the one they keep hidden, then stick around. Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe to see where I go next, and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip. Another criticism of Doha Airport is that you need to know the name of the lounge you're heading for. There's very little signage to help you. For example, if you don't know that the Al Marjan lounge is only for Qatar's business class passengers, not for those travelling with status, you're not going to know which direction to head in. And there's quite a few lounges at Doha Airport these days, with more on the way. I did know that since my last visit, new lounges have opened for One World status holders in the vicinity of the A gates, so I headed in that direction to check them out. There's actually 3 new lounges, and they're poorly signed and confusingly named. The Silver Lounge is for Silver card holders in Qatar's own frequent flyer scheme, and I never worked out where it was. The Gold Lounge, confusingly, is for One World Sapphire status holders, which includes BA Silver card holders. The Platinum Lounge is for One World Emerald status holders, which is BA Gold. So Silver card holders should head for the Gold Lounge, and Gold card holders should head for the Platinum Lounge. Confusing, but it's all moot anyway if you can't even find the lounges in the first place. So up in the lift to the Platinum Lounge, and it looked nice. A buffet/dining area was located immediately outside the lifts. The buffet was good, hot and cold food options with plenty of staff keeping an eye on things. Beyond this was a fairly spacious and airy seating area with a manned bar and a self-service wine and beer station in the middle. But it was really busy. There's capacity for 140 people, and that wasn't enough that evening. Which made me think the Qatar Al Marjan Business Lounge was uncomfortably busy when I last visited, mainly because no status lounge like this had been available. So I quickly left this Platinum Lounge and headed back to see whether the pressure on Qatar's massive business lounge had eased with the opening of these new lounges, and it seems that was the case. The Al Marjan Lounge was blissfully quiet. The Platinum Lounge was a step up from the old Gold status lounge in Doha, but it didn't exactly overwhelm me with its brilliance, let's say. The Al Marjan Lounge is pretty good though, particularly when you're not fighting for space with others. I was planning to eat on the next flight, so I wasn't interested in the food this time, but I headed upstairs to the bar and settled in for an hour. And unlike my last visit, there was gin in the bar this time. Friendly staff too, probably because they're not completely flat out serving so many people. And off to the gate, dodging a puddle of vomit left by one of the younger travellers, and boarding was already well underway. Pretty much an unbroken walk straight onto the plane, a 17-year-old A330-200 which has been with Qatar since delivery. When I booked, this was scheduled to be operated by another 787, similar to the one in which I'd flown down from Dublin. But a few weeks after booking, it had been swapped for this A330 with its 4-row 222 business cabin. This had happened to me before on a flight to Bangkok, but on that occasion it was because the flight had an exceptionally low load in business. I ended up with no one else in the entire row, so that experience had been okay, but any hope that today's change had come about from the same reason was quickly dashed, as the business cabin ended up being completely full. It was quite amusing to hear the crew actively apologising to passengers for the experience they were delivering. It's quite a shock if, like many passengers, you'd flown into Doha in a Q suite. So the seat. A nice big screen dead ahead with a coat hook. Under this is the really tight foot cubby. Over your shoulder is a small flat surface next to the plugs and the IFE controller, with a bottle of water and headphones further back. On the other side is a reading light and literature, which included the menus for this flight. Nothing is within easy reach on either side. You need significant upper body flexibility to be able to pivot enough to reach anything. None of the words in that paragraph was storage, and that's problem one with the seat. There is none. Particularly as there's a blanket, a pillow and a cushion already on your seat when you board, with nowhere for them to go. Then they hand out pyjamas. Great, but there's nowhere to put them. I joked whether I was supposed to balance them on my head. You can see from this footage I took after landing that the window seat is set marginally ahead of the aisle seat, and you can see how far back any surfaces you may want to use actually are. That protruding panel seemed to be a design feature rather than a fault, odd as that might sound. A pre-departure quarter glass of champagne was delivered, which helped with the mood somewhat, but I was already sensing that this was unlikely to be the high point of my flying history. We pushed back a few minutes later, and on this occasion I was on the correct side of the plane to get a good view of Doha as we left. It's quite an attractive place after dark. So why is Qatar persevering with this outdated plane? In 2020, Qatar Airways noticed degradation to the paintwork on some of its new Airbus A350s. The fear was that this might affect the lightning protection systems built into the airplane's skin. This led the Qatari Aviation Authority to ground many of the aircraft in question, and a big ding-dong with Airbus ensued. Other airlines had similar issues, but no other airline or authority felt the need to be as aggressive in its response as Qatar did. One might speculate about other commercial reasons for this dispute winding up so significantly, but that would be speculation. So not only was a chunk of Qatar's wide-body fleet grounded, but Qatar started to refuse deliveries of new A350s. So Airbus stepped up the tit-for-tat retaliation by ceasing deliveries of new aircraft and cancelling orders. In 2020 and 21 this didn't matter so much, as global aviation was on its knees, but as the recovery has continued, Qatar has ended up short of aircraft, so has taken these A330-200s out of storage and started using them. And we drew the short straw that day by being allocated one on this admittedly low-yield leisure route to Phuket in Thailand. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the dispute with Airbus has now been settled, and remediation work on the 20 or so grounded aircraft is underway, so hopefully these A330s will be re-retired in the very near future. The smart play would have been to go straight to sleep on this 6-hour and 12-minute flight, but this was my fourth Qatar flight in the last year, yet was the first one to offer the iconic Arabic meze starter, so I decided to stay awake and have dinner. I could always nap when I got to Phuket. The table rises from the armrest. You're not getting out of your seat with that deployed, let me tell you. I started with some wine. The crew actually collected the menus at the end of this flight, so I can't tell you what it was, but it was very nice, with some nuts. The crew did try to get through the service quickly, so I was able to enjoy this as we flew overhead Dubai, cracking views of the Palm Jumeirah. As with the bedding, cushioning and the pyjamas, standing operating procedures on this flight was obviously to give the full Qatar experience, even if the seat layout hadn't perhaps been designed with this in mind. So the full table setup was laid out in anticipation of the meze. But first, an amuse-bouche. I don't have the menu, so I can't tell you what it was, except to say it was really rather nice. Then the meze with warm pita bread, delicious. And the serving is probably large enough to be a main course. In no way is that a criticism, by the way. For my main, I had actually pre-ordered before boarding, mostly to see how Qatar's pre-ordering system matched up against Singapore Airlines, which I flew a few days later. There's really no comparison, by the way, although the Qatari chicken matchboos with Daku's sauce was pretty good. No dessert, that was more than enough, and it was time to sleep, or to try to sleep. The seat does go flat, although it is very narrow and the foot cubby is very tight. There was no way I was going to inconvenience my neighbour 4 times to get in and out, to change into and out of those pyjamas. It was really cramped in bed mode, although one benefit of being so boxed in was that it did feel quite private in my window slot. I slept fitfully for a few hours and I woke in time to see an Indian Ocean sunrise, which was really quite pleasant. Then the table performance was repeated for the breakfast, which wasn't particularly substantial, and I might have been a little annoyed if I'd skipped dinner, but it hit the spot and did give my body the appropriate signal that night was over and it was time for another day. This really is an attractive part of the world, so I'll linger over the views from the window as I wrap this flight up. It's really annoying when equipment gets changed after booking. It's happened to me a few times of late. My KLM flight was originally booked onto their new 787 product. I ended up on KLM's 777 in a 222 configuration, but as that airframe is 2 feet wider than the A330, there's so much more space to work with that 222 layout was actually quite comfortable. I've seen online that Qatar will allow you to rebook if your equipment is changed from a Q suite to one of their lesser business offerings, but from Qatar's perspective, a swap from a 787 to a 330 still gives you one of their business class seats. I didn't attempt to change flights as I'd already locked in my onward travel, and the journalist in me was happy-ish to fly on this product to be able to cover it for you guys. And as I said, I hope this problem goes away completely as their A350s come back into service. But offering the full service experience that you'd enjoy on a Q-Suite flight feels a bit like putting £10 of service into a £5 bag on an A330. You really don't need a cushion and a pillow, and it's really frustrating to receive pyjamas when the logistics of changing are so challenging that there's nowhere to put them or the clothes you change out of. It's just not very well thought through, and I really cannot recommend a flight on this equipment. I remember flying in these seats 17 years ago when they were brand new and were innovative for their time, and I remember having a fantastic experience. But times have moved on, and if you've ever been in a Q-Suite, this offering is really laughably bad. This was a redemption flight paid for with Avios. Possible now Qatar has adopted Avios as its frequent flyer currency. My one-way trip from Dublin to Phuket through Doha cost me 75,000 Avios plus £160. That's a considerably lower cash contribution than a flight from London would have been, as I was able to avoid UK air passenger duty by starting my journey in Dublin. If you value an Avio at 1p, this trip cost me around £910. Not that cheap, but much cheaper than buying a one-way flight in business class, which prices up at well over £3,000. So off into Phuket Airport and a very quick and easy entry into Thailand. No landing cards these days, but 10 fingerprints were taken along with my photo, and I was in to enjoy this spectacular destination. Folkestone's beach is pleasant, but Phuket's is better. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Please give this video a like if you did. And please leave me a comment. Have you had equipment changed on you after booking? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, there is a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.